Motherhood is a lifelong commitment, yet sometimes I question its rewards. They say maternal love is the purest connection, an unbreakable bond that withstands all challenges. I once held that belief. I thought children would always stand by their mothers, particularly during times of family hardship. However, some children seem destined not to love, but to bring suffering to those who raised them. My daughter, Lindsey, falls into this category. To the outside world, Lindsey appears to be the epitome of success, a brilliant professional thriving in the technology sector. Her annual salary reaches six figures. She resides in an upscale apartment in downtown Phoenix, cruises around in her latest Tesla, and jets across the globe as though money grows on trees. Yet beneath this glossy exterior lies someone devoid of empathy, a person who didn't hesitate to cast her own parents into homelessness. I struggled to comprehend the origin of such callousness. It certainly wasn't from me or my husband, Richard. We dedicated our lives to her well-being, nurturing her with everything within our means. While we weren't wealthy, we maintained a comfortable lifestyle. Richard established a small real estate company in the 1980s, which we had hoped would become our family's enduring legacy. But Lindsey never aligned with our family's values. From her earliest years, she remained emotionally distant, never truly connecting with the family unit. She rejected the clothes I purchased for her, avoided helping with household chores, and always seemed to exist on the periphery of our family circle. Initially, I attributed her behavior to a strong personality. However, as time passed, it became evident that Lindsey's detachment wasn't mere independence, it was complete emotional disconnection from her family. She avoided family functions, showed no interest in her father's business, and never expressed concern about my well-being. Her college years in a faraway city only amplified this disconnect. She skipped holiday visits, never initiated contact, and treated my calls as unwelcome interruptions. Still, I clung to hope that maturity would bring understanding, that time would help her appreciate the importance of family bonds. My hopes were misplaced. The 2008 real estate crisis dealt our family business a severe blow. Richard and I exhausted every option to maintain operations, but our situation continued to deteriorate. When our son, Thomas, stepped in to manage the business, we were optimistic about a potential turnaround. Yet none of us could have anticipated how dramatically our circumstances would deteriorate. Despite Thomas's valiant efforts, our company's downward spiral continued unabated. Our client base dwindled rapidly, ongoing projects ground to a halt, and eventually, we faced the unthinkable, possible foreclosure of our family home, where we had created memories for 3 decades. In this moment of crisis, I naturally turned to Lindsey, believing she would extend a helping hand. Given her financial prosperity and her position as our daughter, I thought she might assist us. I wasn't seeking charity, just some form of support to weather this devastating storm. And help did come. But it wasn't born of familial love, it was purely transactional. Rather than offering direct financial assistance, she orchestrated an elaborate scheme. Through a newly created entity, Divine Investments, she purchased our home under the guise of a banking institution. We were reduced to mere borrowers while she orchestrated everything from behind the curtain, masquerading as our financial savior. I'll never forget Richard's reaction when he uncovered the truth. His heartbreak was palpable. "She manipulated us," he whispered, his voice breaking. This wasn't help. This was about power. Yet, I remained stubbornly optimistic. I convinced myself that perhaps this was just her way of showing care, albeit through harsh means. I reassured myself that maintaining regular payments would keep everything stable. How naive I was. Lindsey's true intention was never assistance, it was dominance. She craved proof of her superiority, reveling in our dependence on her supposed generosity. This reality didn't fully dawn on me until that video surfaced. The revelation came through an unexpected message from Uncle Jason containing video footage. Its significance wasn't immediately apparent, but upon viewing it, my world shattered completely. The video captured a kitchen scene, Richard, Thomas, and me discussing Lindsey. Though casual, our conversation perhaps carried undertones of criticism. While the exact words escape me now, I knew Lindsey had seen it, awakening something dark within her. Uncle Jason's subsequent message was ominous. Margaret, exercise caution. Lindsey isn't someone to be underestimated. Initially, his warning seemed excessive. I couldn't fathom that a simple recorded conversation would drive my daughter to orchestrate our family's destruction with calculated cruelty. I expected typical reactions: anger, arguments, temporary silence. But Lindsey chose a different path. She laughed. Then began her methodical planning. In retrospect, I realized I had nurtured a monster, a child devoid of compassion, love, or basic human decency toward her own family. I once prided myself on my mothering skills. Now, I'm haunted by a single question: where did I go wrong in raising Lindsey? People often describe family as an anchor, a sanctuary where one can always find solace. I once held this belief dearly. I was convinced that as long as we remained united, we could overcome any obstacle life threw our way. How terribly mistaken I was. Our family started out as the epitome of traditional values, built on what seemed like an unshakable foundation. Richard, my husband, established Mitchell Realty during the 1980s, a modest yet steady real estate venture in Phoenix. While we weren't swimming in luxury, we had enough resources to provide our 2 children with a comfortable upbringing in a cozy home, complete with a small backyard where my lavender garden flourished, something that brought special joy to young Lindsey. During those early years, I believed we embodied the perfect family unit. Richard exemplified the ideal husband and father, while Thomas and Lindsey were children who filled me with endless pride. Then came the subtle shifts in Lindsey's behavior. Family dinners lost their appeal to her, and she began declining our vacation invitations. In her younger days, she would eagerly join me in the kitchen every Saturday night, assisting with cookie baking. But as time progressed, she gradually withdrew from these cherished moments. She developed an air of detachment, carrying herself like someone who felt out of place in her own home. I tried rationalizing her behavior, telling myself she was simply unique, perhaps someone who struggled with emotional expression. However, when she departed for college, the truth became crystal clear. She hadn't just grown distant, she had completely severed her familial ties. Lindsey pursued technology, venturing into a field that felt foreign and somewhat unsettling to us. Our resistance wasn't due to old-fashioned values, but rather our hopes of her eventually taking the reins of our family enterprise, continuing the legacy we had painstakingly built. I remember Richard's words to her. "I'm not against you chasing your dreams, but have you thought about the family? One day, when your parents grow old, who will run the company?" But Lindsey mastered the art of evading such discussions. She would avoid eye contact whenever we broached the subject of our future. Her sole focus was on gaining independence, breaking free from everything, as if we were chains holding her back. Thomas, however, was cut from different cloth. While he might not have matched Lindsey's intellectual prowess, he possessed the heart of a truly devoted son. He poured his energy into his father's company, fighting to maintain stability even as market conditions deteriorated. When economic turmoil struck, causing longtime clients to withdraw and the business to falter, Thomas remained steadfast. He spent countless nights strategizing ways to retain customers and salvage deals. Never once did he voice complaints or make demands. His sole mission was preserving our family's strength and unity. But Lindsey? She remained indifferent, living in her self-created bubble, deliberately excluding her family from her world. I vividly recall her final visit home before everything crumbled. It was Christmas, a time when I desperately hoped to mend our fractured family bonds. But fate had different plans in store. I dedicated the entire day to preparing a special dinner. I meticulously crafted all of Lindsey's childhood favorites: a traditional Western-style roast, creamy mashed potatoes, and homemade apple pie. I clung to the hope that beneath her transformed exterior, a fragment of her former self might still recognize these cherished memories. However, when Lindsey entered, she barely acknowledged our presence before immersing herself in her phone, scanning through emails. She delayed joining us at the table, consumed by work-related messages. When Richard attempted to engage her about her career, her responses were distant and detached, as if conversing with complete strangers. Thomas, his feelings visibly hurt, couldn't resist making a pointed comment. "Well, Lindsey, you finally managed to find time to visit your family, huh?" Lindsey cast a glance at her brother, displaying a smirk that sent shivers through me. "Family is still here, isn't it? It's not like it ever disappeared," she remarked dismissively before returning to her phone. I found myself wondering, had we ceased to exist as family in her mind long ago? Later, when our business truly faced financial collapse, we were left with a single option: seeking Lindsey's assistance. She alone possessed the financial means to guide us through this crisis. Neither Richard nor I wanted this, but Thomas insisted. "She's still my sister. Family helps each other. That's just how it is." I shared his conviction. During our meeting with Lindsey, she listened intently. Yet her expression remained unreadable. She showed no concern, no empathy, never inquiring about our well-being or her father's stress levels. She simply sat there, arms crossed, her gaze fixed upon me. "I can help," she finally declared. "But I have conditions." I anticipated requests for a structured repayment plan or assurances against dependency. Instead, Lindsey's approach wasn't that of helping family. She aimed to transform us into indebted subordinates. She established divine investments, acquiring our home through a private bank's name. She claimed this arrangement best served our needs while maintaining financial independence. This wasn't assistance, it was reducing us to debtors of our own daughter. At the time, I consoled myself thinking this arrangement would preserve our family unity, that somehow Lindsey still harbored care for us. I deliberately overlooked the warning signs, the ice in her eyes, the telling smirk that emerged whenever Thomas expressed gratitude. I failed to recognize that, from that pivotal moment, she had ensnared our family in an invisible web of her own design. I held on to the belief that regardless of our differences or countless disputes, Lindsey remained my flesh and blood. I convinced myself that somewhere within her, genuine affection for our family still existed, that any grievances could be resolved through open dialogue and heartfelt conversations. But when that video surfaced, I was forced to confront my own foolish optimism. It started as any typical Friday. While preparing coffee in the kitchen, my phone alerted me to a message from Jason, Richard's brother who resided in Phoenix. His communications were rare, reserved only for matters of significance. Opening his message revealed a brief statement. "You need to see this." Attached was a short video, barely 2 minutes in length. As I pressed play, I remained blissfully unaware that these moments would irreversibly alter our family's trajectory. The footage revealed a familiar setting: myself, Richard, and Thomas gathered at our kitchen table, our usual spot for morning coffee. The recording angle suggested concealment, likely from a strategically placed phone on the counter. Then my words echoed through the speaker. "Lindsey only helped because she feels indebted to us. After everything we've invested in her, handling this mortgage payment is the minimum she could do." I recalled this discussion about our financial obligations and the upcoming mortgage deadline. Our intentions weren't malicious, yet my recorded voice carried an unmistakable edge of bitterness. Thomas's laughter punctuated the video. "Exactly. And she behaves as if she's doing us some grand favor. It's absurd." The footage showed me nodding subtly, but it was Richard's response, the man Lindsey once idolized, that proved most damaging. His contribution wasn't verbal. He simply remained silent, nodding in agreement with our expressed sentiments. Reflecting on that moment, I realized I hadn't articulated my complete feelings. My emotions weren't rooted in hatred, but in deep disappointment. I yearned for Lindsey to demonstrate more familial devotion and consideration. But such nuances couldn't be captured in video form. This brief recording would serve as Lindsey's proof of our perceived betrayal. Shortly after, Jason's follow-up message arrived. "She's already viewed it." An ominous sensation crept through my body. Instinctively, I located Lindsey's contact information, poised to initiate a call. Yet something made me pause. Words escaped me. Her potential reaction remained unpredictable. The wait for her response proved mercifully brief. About 60 minutes later, my phone buzzed with her message. Mom, I need space to process this. The cryptic response left me bewildered. I hastily responded, Lindsey, we must discuss this. You've misunderstood my words. My message lingered unanswered in digital silence. And then, our true ordeal commenced. 48 hours passed before Jason reached out again. Margaret, you're blind to who Lindsey really is. I overheard her conversation. If you believe she'll simply forget this, you're mistaken. She's orchestrating something. I dismissed his concerns. Lindsey isn't vindictive, Jason. She has a heart. Jason's prolonged pause ended with a heavy exhale. Is that what you believe? Then explain her 2-day silence. Remember, Lindsey is methodical in everything. An immediate reaction would signal genuine anger. This silence, it suggests calculation. His observation haunted my thoughts throughout the day. I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself that I still knew my daughter, that Lindsey would never deliberately harm her family. Yet, the disquiet persisted. Then, an unsettling development emerged. The following afternoon, Thomas summoned me to Richard's study. His tone carried unmistakable tension. Mom, we've encountered a problem. Entering, I found my husband transfixed by his computer screen, his expression a mask of shock. The display showed our mortgage payment account, the one designated for our monthly housing payments. Something was amiss. The current month's transaction had failed. What's happening? I inquired. Richard's mouse hand trembled as he shook his head. Our payment was declined. The bank rejected the transaction. That's not possible. Our payment history is impeccable. Thomas immediately contacted the bank. Upon ending the call, his complexion had drained. The rejection occurred because the bank no longer holds our mortgage. My pulse nearly ceased. Who does then? Thomas met my gaze, his eyes reflecting unprecedented fear. He displayed a newly received email from Destined Investments, LLC. It contained a single line. We have assumed legal ownership of the mortgage for this property. Below sat Lindsey's signature. I stood paralyzed. No, this couldn't be real. But clarity struck me. She hadn't merely viewed the recording. She hadn't simply experienced anger. She had chosen to conclude matters according to her own design. Lindsey avoided confrontation. She bypassed arguments. She refrained from outbursts. She methodically manipulated the chess pieces on life's board, transforming our family sanctuary into her strategic asset. Now, she wielded complete control over our destiny. I collapsed into the chair, my trembling fingers clutching the table's edge. In this moment, I gained perfect clarity about who my daughter truly was. Lindsey had evolved into someone far removed from the child I'd nurtured. She had become my adversary. I had desperately clung to the belief that despite Lindsey's emotional distance, despite her growing detachment from our family unit, somewhere within her beat the heart of my child. But when that email from Destined Investments, LLC appeared, bearing her unmistakable signature, reality shattered my illusions. This Lindsey was a stranger to the daughter I had brought into this world. She had severed her ties with us. She now orchestrated our family's destiny with calculated precision. We remained motionless in Richard's office, our eyes fixed on the monitor's glow. The horrifying truth had crystallized with brutal clarity. Lindsey hadn't erupted in anger, hadn't engaged in heated debates, hadn't confronted us directly. Instead, she had observed silently, strategically planning each calculated move. Then, when the moment was perfect, she executed her plan. Our monthly mortgage payments no longer went to the bank. They were now directed to Lindsey. And in a calculated move, she had ceased covering her portion, leaving us vulnerable to imminent foreclosure. The air felt thick and unbreathable. This isn't possible, I murmured weakly. Lindsey couldn't betray her own family like this. Thomas's fist crashed against the wooden surface. When will you see the truth, Mom? She orchestrated this entire scenario. She's been waiting to strike. Richard remained eerily silent, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, staring at the screen as though reality had shifted into something unrecognizable. I frantically grabbed my phone, dialing Lindsey's number. Her anger, her judgment of our worth, none of it mattered. I needed to reach her. But as the rings echoed, I anticipated the inevitable. Sure enough, after 3 rings, the familiar automated message played. I'm unavailable right now. Please leave a message. Fighting back tears, I steadied my breath and recorded. Lindsey, I know you've seen the video. I understand you're hurt. But this action against your family, it's wrong. Please, let's talk. Despite my attempts at composure, my hands quivered as I set down the phone. Deep down, I knew Lindsey would hear the message. But I also knew she wouldn't respond. 3 days crawled by before her text arrived. Mom, I'll join you for Sunday dinner. We can discuss everything then. I understood this wasn't a promise of assistance. Still, she was willing to meet. I immersed myself in dinner preparations with desperate intensity, as if perfect cuisine could salvage our crumbling world. I crafted her childhood favorite, lasagna, layering it with meticulous care. I selected the expensive red wine she preferred during her increasingly rare visits home. I arranged the table settings with precision, clinging to the irrational hope that an impeccable meal might somehow repair our splintered family bonds. Lindsey arrived exactly at 6 p.m. She entered with corporate poise, her dark hair pulled back severely, wearing an expensive tailored suit, emanating a perfume both elegant and austere. She carried herself not as a daughter returning home, but as an executive entering a boardroom. My embrace met with rigid resistance. Thomas observed her from his seat, undisguised anger darkening his features. Richard acknowledged her with only a curt nod. Tension saturated the room. Lindsey took her seat, maintaining an artificial smile. Everything looks wonderful, Mom, she remarked with unsettling composure. I attempted cheerfulness. I made your favorite. Let's enjoy dinner before discussing anything, all right? Lindsey's eyebrow arched. That's unnecessary. We should address the matter directly. My insides clenched. Richard set down his wine, fixing her with a steady gaze. Lindsey, what exactly have you done regarding this house? Lindsey affected confusion, though I knew she understood perfectly well. Dad, I've simply exercised my legal entitlements. Thomas released a scornful laugh. Entitlements? This home belongs to our parents. Lindsey's smile remained fixed. Actually, brother, she replied softly, legally, Divine Investments holds ownership. And I control that company. Richard's hands balled into fists. Are you suggesting you'll evict your own parents? I searched her face, desperately hoping for denial. Hoping for mercy. She merely shrugged. I'm not doing anything active. The mortgage payments weren't complete. Banks have protocols, Mom knows this. Her words struck like physical blows. Lindsey, you could help us, I begged. Pay off the mortgage. We just need more time, I swear. She interrupted coldly. Mom, this isn't emotional. It's business. The words seemed surreal. Business? I gasped. We're your family. Lindsey released a soft laugh, but her eyes remained glacial. Family doesn't behave like those people in the video, isn't that right, Mom? I remained motionless, words failing me. Lindsey rose from her chair with calculated precision, smoothing her designer blazer. I believe we've covered everything necessary. All terms are outlined in the contract. The next installment is due in 10 days. Failure to meet this obligation will trigger subsequent procedures. She turned toward the exit. I leaped from my chair, desperately grasping her arm. Lindsey, you can't possibly do this. This is our family home. You have no right to. She extracted her arm from my grip, her face an impenetrable mask. You're mistaken, Mom, she breathed, her words barely audible. This property now belongs to me. With that, she departed, leaving us there in the dwelling that would soon slip from our grasp forever. The pain of my daughter's betrayal competed with the agony of watching her coldly strip away our home without the slightest remorse. Since that fateful dinner when Lindsey walked out, I had attempted countless times to reach her. Phone calls, text messages, voicemails piled up unanswered. She had effectively erased us from her concept of family. When Richard approached the bank seeking answers, they repeated the same response mechanically. The current mortgage holder is exercising their legal authority. If the outstanding amount isn't settled within the specified timeframe, foreclosure proceedings will commence. the current mortgage holder, my own flesh and blood. That morning, I awakened to an inexplicable dread gripping my heart. Descending to the kitchen, I found Richard, who'd been stationed there since daybreak, gazing vacantly outside. The letter from Divine Investments, delivered 3 days prior, lay on the table. Despite reading it countless times, it still felt like an impossible nightmare. Notice of payment default. Failure to resolve outstanding balance will result in foreclosure and mandatory evacuation within 30 days. I attempted to grasp Richard's hand, but he remained unresponsive. We must take action, I whispered. We can't allow her to destroy us like this. Thomas stormed into the kitchen, hurling his phone onto the table. Mom, would you prefer the bad news or the devastating news? I faced my son, my heart plummeting. What's happened? Thomas emitted a cynical, empty laugh. Lindsey has submitted an official eviction notice with Phoenix authorities. If we don't vacate by week's end, we'll face court orders. Time seemed to stop. It was incomprehensible. She had actually followed through. I still remember that day. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting harsh shadows across the pavement. I lingered in the doorframe, clutching my phone, desperately wishing, pleading, that Lindsey would have a last-minute change of heart. But as the moving truck pulled up alongside the court officials, I knew that hope had vanished. They approached and presented the formal eviction notice. Richard remained silent, methodically reading every single line. Thomas, however, lost his composure. Please, we just need more time. This is our family home. The officer merely shook his head in response. I apologize, but this is a legal proceeding. You have 30 days to leave the premises. Each word felt like a physical blow. I struggled to maintain my composure. A toxic mixture of shame, anguish, and rage coursed through me, but nothing hurt more than the judgmental stares from our neighbors. Their whispers carried across the yard. The Mitchells are being evicted? Where's Lindsey? Why isn't she helping her family? I heard she's the one behind all this. That final comment shattered what remained of my heart. I scanned the crowd, desperately seeking an ally, someone to stand beside us. But we stood alone, because everyone knew the truth. My own daughter had orchestrated our downfall. 2 days before our deadline expired, Lindsey appeared. I was in the front yard, watching Richard and Thomas load the final boxes when her pristine Tesla glided up our driveway. She emerged, immaculate as always. No remorse, no uncertainty, just cold, calculated detachment in her gaze. I moved instinctively. Why are you here, Lindsey? I demanded. Come to witness your parents' eviction firsthand? She paused before responding, surveying our possessions scattered across the lawn as if observing a mundane scene. Finally, she met my gaze. I came to offer assistance. I nearly choked. Assistance? You've torn this family apart, made your parents homeless. And now you want to help. Lindsey exhaled softly and folded her arms. This could have been avoided if you'd accepted the consequences of your decisions. I gaped in disbelief. Decisions? What are you talking about? She fixed me with an unwavering stare, her voice unnaturally steady. The contract was explicit. You understood the terms. You had options, but you chose this path. My world tilted. You honestly believe I had a choice? You think I wanted this outcome? She shrugged dismissively. You should have known better than to challenge me. But you did. These are the consequences. That final word echoed endlessly in my mind. Consequences. This wasn't retribution. This was pure revenge. I gazed at Lindsey, feeling my soul shatter into fragments. Don't you feel any remorse? I murmured. Even slightly? She paused momentarily. Then, she shook her head. No. One syllable. And it devastated me completely. I retreated, feeling my legs weaken beneath me. Then I no longer have a daughter. Lindsey remained unmoved. She just watched me, as if anticipating this very moment. She turned, walked to her vehicle, and without hesitation, she drove off, leaving us amidst the wreckage of our existence, our residence, our loved ones, everything destroyed. Perhaps the most terrifying reality isn't being deceived by strangers, but being cast aside by your own flesh and blood. Standing in this confined rental apartment where we've been forced to relocate after losing our home, I survey the scattered boxes that remain unopened. For decades of carefully crafting a life, only to find ourselves here confined in this modest space devoid of cherished memories. Settling into a weathered chair, I gaze through the window. The scene before me feels foreign. Gone are the sounds of leaves dancing in my beloved garden. Vanished is the sight of the swing where I once pushed little Lindsey. What remains is just an aching void within. Lindsey has executed her strategy flawlessly. She claimed the house, methodically erasing our existence from her world. No drama, no tarnished image. Just the quietness of a meticulously orchestrated plan. Thomas attempted resistance. Once Lindsey secured legal ownership of the property, she immediately listed it for sale. Word reached us that a young couple purchased it at a price significantly above the remaining mortgage. They were delighted to acquire such an elegant home in a coveted area. And what of us? We were stripped of everything. Richard has become unrecognizable from his former self. The once proud man who created an empire from scratch, who carried himself with dignity, now exists merely as a faint reflection. His smile has vanished, his business discussions with Thomas have ceased. Everything collapsed alongside our home. As for myself, I struggle to identify what remains. I held on to hope that someday, Lindsey would acknowledge her actions. That she'd appear at our doorstep, her eyes filled with remorse, saying, "Mom, I was wrong. I'm sorry." But such a moment never materialized. Lindsey continued forward without a backward glance. She remained unmoved by her actions. Following her acquisition of the house, she resumed her luxurious lifestyle. Reports suggest she's climbed even higher in her corporate career. She likely continues driving her pristine Tesla, frequenting upscale restaurants, enjoying the life she secured by severing ties with her family. And I can't help but wonder, do we ever cross her mind? Does she recall those late nights when I knitted her winter sweaters? Does she remember how I consoled her after disappointing test results? Does she think about that day she tumbled from her bicycle, her knee wounded and bleeding, and how I carried her inside, easing her pain? Or have these memories been buried beneath corporate documents and financial calculations? Perhaps I succeeded in raising an accomplished businesswoman, but the cost was losing my daughter. Countless nights I've spent in this unfamiliar rented bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, repeatedly asking myself, where did I go wrong? Was my expectation of her unreasonable? Did I fail in imparting essential lessons about empathy? Or were there early signs of her emotional distance that I chose to overlook? I could place the blame squarely on Lindsey. I could harbor resentment for her actions. But the most painful realization is this. She became this person through my example. I taught her financial literacy, risk management, and self-preservation. But I neglected to show her that family bonds transcend mere financial calculations. Perhaps Lindsey wasn't inherently cold-hearted. Maybe she was simply molded by our family environment, where financial security and obligations overshadowed the fundamental importance of love. But now, altering this reality seems impossible. I recognize that many others share my experience. Family dynamics are often complex and imperfect. Some children grow distant from their parents. Some parents give everything, only to lose what truly matters. Yet I pose this question. Is there anything money cannot purchase? Lindsey possesses financial security. She wields influence. She is everything that society seemingly values. But does she have genuine family connections? Does she experience warm family gatherings, treasure childhood remembrances, or know unconditional love? She believes she's emerged victorious. Yet I sense that someday, in the solitude of her premium residence, surrounded by legal documents and spreadsheets, she'll recognize the irreplaceable treasure she's lost: family. For those following this narrative, I hope you'll learn from our mistakes, both mine and Lindsey's. If you believe family holds greater value than wealth, please like this post. Share your perspective on Lindsey's actions, right or wrong. Comment below. Remember to subscribe for more touching real-life stories like this. Because ultimately, when family slips away, what remains worthwhile?